Hi, I'm Elaine Engelhardt. Welcome to class. The class is Ethics and Values at Utah Valley State, and we're on our segment now where we're looking at sexual ethics and sexual morality. And the subject often deals with abortion and other issues of birth control. So these class periods can be seen as explicit and would not be suitable for young children. We'd also like to give a disclaimer that we don't necessarily agree with the views that are given in these class periods, either myself, Utah Valley State College, my guest, or the students. However, we do feel good about the pieces that have been chosen, as they are pieces that have withstood the test of time, so to speak, that they are classic pieces. And with me to help with this discussion on literature is Nancy Rushforth. Thank you, Nancy. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.
And over here, we've got Erin and Cassie. And on this side, we have Rhonda and John. Thank you very much. And Nancy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I teach here at UVSC in Humanities and Integrated Studies. I teach research writing and the core Integrated Studies courses as well as Humanities courses. And I'm having a great time doing that. I have 4 children and 1 grandchild that I am delighted with. So that is a very serendipitous experience to be a grandmother for the first time. That's been very fun. But enjoy literature, enjoy reading very much, and I'm pleased to have this discussion with your class.
Sure, and you taught at Brigham Young University for years
did.
As well before coming here. So
I did.
It's really a pleasure having you here with us, and perhaps you can help us a little bit as we're looking at literature and ethics and how literature really brings out a different element when we're looking at an issue such as sexual morality. Can you tell us about the necessity of literature when teaching ethics?
I think we can make different kinds of applications to these issues through reading fictional experiences from the fictional characters. And often these experiences are based on not necessarily the author's real experience, but on someone that they knew, on real experiences of someone. Mm-hmm. And we get a different perspective in reading them as personal experiences rather than the abstract theory that we talk about often in talking about ethics. Here they are applied to characters in people's lives.
Yes, and some of these characters we like, and quite often we can picture the situation, we can see what's going on, we can see where they've got a problem or a true dilemma, two
Yes.
very much conflicting interests, and they're not quite sure where to go on it. And in fact, our first piece by A.J. Cronin on Dr. I Can't, I Won't Have a Child, we see some real conflicting interests here then.
Very much so.
Yes, well, we've got Cassie here as our specialist to tell us a little bit about A.J. Cronin.
Okay, A.J. Cronin was born in Scotland. His mother was Protestant and his father was Catholic, so it's an interesting mix. And he studied medicine. He was always a very good writer and won many writing competitions, but ended up studying medicine and then turned from that and started writing books. And his books, The Citadel and The Keys of the Kingdom, have been made into Oscar-nominated films. And he's just been quite the author, written quite a few very acclaimed books.
Yes, and you know what I really find fascinating about him is that he's a physician.
Yeah.
That he was always a very gifted student, and so through his writing was able to get scholarships for medical school.
Yeah.
And he and his wife were both physicians, and so as he's writing this piece to us, for us about Dr. I Can't, I Won't Have a Child, he is a physician. And so could have been a real experience here. So. Let's go ahead and move on into the reading then, if that's okay with you. And who'd like to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this reading? John, thanks.
You have a woman, her name is Beatrice.
Beatrice Glendenning.
Beatrice, yeah. And she's coming to a doctor because she's pregnant and she's asking for an abortion. And they both, you get the idea from the very beginning that they're kind of upper class socialites.
Yes.
Wealthy. And that's how it begins, yeah.
All right. And then so let's go ahead and look at this for a minute. We can tell that she's an upper class socialite. And how do we know that, Nancy?
He describes her dress her costume, what she is wearing, an expensive diamond clip at the beginning. And then as we read further into the story, we get an idea of their social relationship. They know each other personally as well as professionally. She is his client, he's her physician, but they also know each other well, and there is a suggestion of hunting trips that he is invited to at their property. So there are things, several things throughout the story that give us the information about their class, and he has saved appointments in which she is included for his best clients.
Okay, his best clients get to come at this time.
Yes.
And that means, you know, they get more attention from him, and he probably gets more money from them.
Yes. Yes.
Anything you'd like to add to this, Erin, about our initial description of Beatrice Glendenning?
Well, I think what's interesting is what he says, not about her, but about the other women that he describes in, I guess it's like the third paragraph or so.
You can go ahead and read that if you'd like, yes.
Okay. How often had I heard these words before? I had heard them from frightened little shop girls in trouble, from a shamed spinster aged 35, who told me in a trembling voice, exactly like the heroine of the old-time melodrama, that she had been betrayed, from a famous film actress defiantly resolved that her career should not be ruined. Above all, I had heard them from selfish and neurotic wives, afraid of the pangs of childbirth, afraid of losing their figure, their health, their life, afraid, most specious pretext of all, of losing their husband's love.
Okay, thank you.
And then he says she's different.
Yeah, and he says she's different. So he's saying, I've had all kinds of people come in and tell me that they are pregnant and they don't want this child. So it's very much an unwanted pregnancy. And will you take care of this? And his answer has always been,
you know, that, you know, she's got 2 grown sons, you know,
and this is
who
an
wants to
important
start
point
over
here,
again.
isn't it? Yeah, this is an important point, then, isn't it, Rhonda? Why did you say 2 grown sons is an important point?
Well, this is the doctor thinking that, okay, she's got 2 grown sons, and it must be, you know, that she wants to get on with her life, you know, that the socialness and all the other things that they do are, you know, she just doesn't want to take that road again.
She feels this is inconvenient.
It's inconvenient.
Yes.
Yes, so he's saying...
At least this is his interpretation.
Yeah,
yes,
his
exactly.
interpretation is that it's inconvenient, and I don't know that he necessarily understands what it would be like to be, you know, 40 years old or whatever and have be pregnant, have your 2 grown sons, and suddenly you're starting over. But for him, it's just like, she just sees it as an inconvenience.
I think that she's different from the other women that he's encountered for a couple of reasons. One, that you said that it's inconvenient for her. It's not really that big of a deal like it was for these other women, but it's just inconvenient. And also, she has power. She is a powerful woman, and it's obvious in the way that she addresses him and the way that she kind of carries herself through the story. And also, Erin had mentioned this, that she... that they have a personal relationship, and that kind of throws in a twist.
Right, it just moves us right into the title where she says, Doctor, I won't have a child. So this is absolutely part of her personality as well. Erin, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, like Cassie referred to it, she and I were talking, and I had mentioned, I think that he thinks of her as different because they have a personal relationship. He knows her. These other women he's removed from. You know, she's an actress, which, you know, that comes with all kinds of connotations, or you know, the spinster or these neurotic wives. He doesn't see her as any of these things before this, and so it throws him a bit.
Yeah. He sees her as a social situation. You know, she invites him to dinner and to his land to get his brace of pheasants, and
Yes.
He does not want this jeopardized then.
He has more to lose with her.
He does.
That's why another reason that she's different is that he has more to lose.
And more to gain because she can pay him more.
And, well, possibly. Right.
He wouldn't want to lose her as a
The relationship is more
client.
conflict, yes.
Yeah, he'd like to keep her as a client.
Well, he wants to keep
Rhonda.
the husband as a friend.
Yes.
Sure, wants to keep the husband as a
And
friend.
the pheasants and the hunting.
Yes, he doesn't want to lose the privileges that this relationship is affording him.
Yes.
Either.
Okay,
Plus, you
Rhonda?
also, you know, get in this reading that he's a very principled man. As a doctor, you know, he knows that it's illegal You know, that, you know, these abortions they're not safe, you know, at this period of time, and that they can have dire effects.
Okay, he knows they're not safe. He probably knows that if he wanted to, he could make it safe. But he certainly does not want her going out and getting the abortion by anyone else. He just says, sorry, you're in a tough spot and you're going to be having this baby. And she says, it's not George's. I mean, excuse me, it is George's.
Right. It's not Henry's.
It's
Don't
not
be a
Henry's,
fool,
it's
doctor.
George's. Tell us about that, John. Why is that an extra problem?
Well, now he's got information. I mean, if he wants to remain friends, but now with her and her husband, he's got to basically keep that quiet. But now he's privy to some information that he probably didn't want to have.
Well, he's ticked off, you know. It's like, he's my friend, you know,
Right.
Henry's my friend. You know, why? How could you do this to him? Judgments start coming in there against her.
And we talk about him as a principled man, possibly in some ways. But is there anything in the language that gives us a different view?
John can
Of
hardly
his
wait to tell you.
principles.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't actually say that he didn't give the shop girl or the actress an abortion. It doesn't say he didn't do that. And it doesn't say it explicitly, does it?
No.
Actually, it just says later in the piece that once a doctor embarks upon, I had never lost my head, because once a doctor embarks upon a career as an abortionist, he is irretrievably lost. So
Okay.
he implies that he has never
reputation.
given
That he
in.
has
I
never
just think
done
the way
it.
that he describes these women is not
Very condescending.
It's very condescending and
Condescending, yeah.
But I
You
don't
know,
necessarily
exactly.
think that it's principles that's keeping him from giving this woman an abortion. I think it's more just the social situation. It's that he knows her husband, he wants to keep hunting on their land. I think that I don't necessarily think
it's
it's
part of
principles.
principles, but he doesn't have principles in other areas.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It's interesting that he doesn't want to be an abortionist, because he as a doctor would be irretrievably lost. Not that these women would be. He says, you know, and then he goes into catalog all the risks that they go through to get, you know, basically a back alley abortion, and he seems okay with that.
And
As
this
long as
is-
he's not irretrievably lost.
But he also says, under the best hospital conditions, the operation holds a definite risk.
So
Well, I guess in
he's,
1952 that probably is
Exactly.
correct.
Yeah.
sure, he's not liking this situation at all, is he?
I don't. I'll admit it.
And she feels like they're on the same social standing, that she's been paying him for a long time, and that this is a favor he can do her, actually. He doesn't have to do it for anybody else, but this is actually something that, as one of his privileged appointments, that he probably owes her. So she is expecting this is going to happen, basically, and she's not going to have this child. And she's made that quite clear, I think.
The title and the
Yeah.
first lines of the story, her position, he knows the position that she's in both socially and personally with this pregnancy. I think that's another dilemma, is that he would know that if she leaves his office without receiving his services, she will go someplace else.
So he shouldn't be so
It's another-
surprised later on in the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I
Yes,
was gonna
John.
say, he doesn't end up doing the abortion anyway, but he ends up dealing
Hiding
with
it
the
and covering it.
consequences of
Yes.
it. So, I mean, in the end, he is implicit in the abortion.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay.
There's an
Rhonda.
interesting feeling that I get in here, you know, that he's, as a man, not even as a doctor, you know, he's going to make sure that she doesn't do this, and that by his simply saying, I'm not going to do it, implies that it won't be done.
It won't be done.
A real paternalism there.
Yeah.
In fact, Rhonda, if you'd read that paragraph for us, it's on page 149, the second column, and we're almost to the bottom of the page. And it says, my only possible attitude was not to take her seriously, so I reasoned mildly. Can you see where I'm?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
go
dare
ahead.
say it's rather inconvenient with these two grown-up sons of yours, and it'll spoil your London season. But Henry will be pleased.
Continue.
Don't be a fool, Doctor. Henry isn't the father. Although I had half expected this, it silenced me. During these country weekends, I had met the inevitable family intimate a close friend of Henry's who went fishing and shooting with him, a sporting type, one of those good fellows whom I had disliked on sight and who obviously was on confidential terms with Henry's wife. Well, I said at last, it's a bad business, but there's nothing I can do about it.
And she says, you won't help me, and he says, I can't. Okay, so, and that leaves him kind of cranky, you know. She of course is upset because he has to be her resort on this very much life-altering problem. I mean, we've talked about this issue in class where we've said that often an unwanted pregnancy has no good solution to it. You know, abortion isn't a good solution. I mean, it's not a happy solution. Giving the baby up for adoption is not a happy solution. It just seems like, you know, even for her, raising the child, having the child and raising it is not a happy solution. She's not there anymore. And so she's very upset about this. For her, she has no good alternatives, and she was hoping that maybe the physician would do so. So any insights on being caught in this kind of a situation, Nancy?
Certainly this story is one of the reasons that we do turn to literature for this examination of these ethical issues, is that it does give us a personal insight to this. It lets us see into her personal life and the dilemma that she's faced with. Not only the timing of this pregnancy, but the fact that her husband is not the father. This adds some terrible complexities to her life, the pregnancy itself, plus the decision of what to do about the pregnancy. So this brings us into a very personal application of the dilemma and the complexity of these issues.
Very complex, and he's just saying, oh, it'll be a bad season in London.
Yes, yes.
Rather than really seeing the seriousness of it.
Right, and tells us specifically that he's not taking her seriously.
Okay.
He's not taking her problems seriously at all.
Okay.
She'll figure it out.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on this? Well, then let's move along. And she says, okay, there's no more to be said. And then he's grumpy and unhappy. She's grumpy and unhappy. And he thinks it's the end of it, so he says. But on page 150, first column, we have about halfway down, about 10 days later, the telephone rang. Do you want to pick that up for us, Cassie?
Mm-hmm. It was Henry Glendinning himself. Beatrice, he told me, had a frightful cold, an attack of influenza, in fact. Would I be a dear chap and pop round to Knightsbridge as soon as convenient? Pleased by this rapprochement, I arrived within the hour at the Glendinning townhouse and was shown directly to Beatrice's room.
Okay, so he gets a call and it's influenza. And what's the situation here then, Nancy?
Well, he gets the call this time from the husband.
Yes.
And this just emphasizes the sexist nature of the narrator of this story, or at least of the doctor. Not only do we get his use of language in the second paragraph where he's describing the women who come to him, but now when the husband has requested his intervention in this, he's there very shortly.
Yes, within an hour.
Within an hour, he is at her bedside. And yet, he wonders what to do. What is the ethical thing to do? And even though her life is at risk now, at this point,
yes,
he's wondering, should I help her?
Okay, very good. I mean, he has to think about this. In the next paragraph, the very last sentence in it, Rhonda, would you read that one for us?
The very last?
The thing had been done.
Oh.
I can go ahead and start.
I'm not sure where you're at again.
The thing had been done, botched and bungled. Mm-hmm. She was thoroughly septic and had been hemorrhaging for at least 12 hours. Okay, so we've got a bad description.
A horrible situation.
And yeah, we've got a horrible situation. There's a nurse here. She says, I've got everything ready for you. And let's see his reaction again. And Rhonda, we'll have you read that one for us. I drew back in cold fury.
I drew back in cold fury. I wanted, there and then, to walk out of the room. But how could I? She was an extremis. I must do something for this damned woman, and at once. I was fairly trapped.
And read the next paragraph as well.
I began to work on her. My methods, I fear, were not especially merciful, but she offered no protest. Suffered, I'm sorry,
You're just right. Suffered the severest
Suffered
pains.
the severest pangs without a word. At last, the bleeding was under control, and I prepared to go.
Okay, thank you. So once again, we see some real sexism going on in here as well. John, what gives you pause? What are problems that you see in these two paragraphs?
The one I have a big problem with is my methods, I fear, were not especially merciful.
Okay.
It's
He's
almost
mad.
like he's punishing her.
He's punishing her
Yeah.
painfully.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and Cassie?
When he walks into the situation and is describing her situation, it's very impersonal the way he describes it. He said the thing had been done, botched and
Yes.
bundled. He's
Yes.
talking about the actual operation and not her and like what really she's experiencing. It's just
Okay.
really impersonal and cold. And
Oh, the
Very
doctor's
impersonal.
ticked off.
Yeah.
Well, this is all about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all about him, not about her.
Yes, she is a damned woman, and then he says, I was fairly trapped. So the thing he's
Yeah.
concerned about is the position that he's in.
Okay. Yeah.
And mostly
not
because Henry
necessarily-
called.
Yeah, and Henry's
Yeah.
out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want Henry to be disappointed if
Certainly not.
no, if something happened to Beatrice. Okay, so Erin.
Oh, I was going to say in the next section here, I thought it was interesting that earlier you said that you felt like they were on the same social level.
Yeah.
I always got the impression that she was
She's
on a
above
higher
him.
social
Yeah,
level than
yeah,
he
you're
was,
right.
and he was dependent upon her for having this tremendous social standing. Not only is he already at the town, a doctor or whatever, but to be the doctor of these people lends something to him.
You're absolutely right about that.
Because
yeah.
what she says here was so great is when she says, it's influenza, doctor.
Yeah.
Henry knows it's influenza. I shall expect you this evening.
she's totally in control.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
as ill as she is.
Yeah.
She is, and it's going to go right along with her plan here. And where does this come in? Does the doctor need to tell Henry that she's had a botched abortion?
Oh, he wants to.
He wants to.
And they're about
Rhonda.
to go on a second honeymoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but tell us about it. Can the physician tell Henry about the influenza?
Well, he's not supposed to. I mean,
Okay.
there's a privacy issue here,
Okay. And
doctor privilege.
and John?
That wasn't a concept that really existed at that time, though. And legally now we have that
Well,
concept of doctor
that's
privilege.
true.
But you've got to remember too, he could tell her husband anything.
Well, yeah.
That's
yeah.
not
You
her,
said
just
that,
her
yeah,
health.
In the 1950s, she was still chattel.
She could have been seen. That's why she probably needed to be so firm about it. But certainly if we put this in today's context, then we know that she would absolutely be able to demand that he not say a word, that this was a botched abortion.
She's a powerful woman.
Yeah, she is. Okay, and John?
I was going to say, it does say something about the story about her character and how powerful she truly is because of the kind of the sexist tone of it. He really could tell her husband, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But the fact that she has that much influence over him, she says no.
Yeah.
He's not going to tell her husband because of her, because of what she's said.
It's almost like he knows if he gets cut off from Beatrice Glendenning and her influence, her circle, besides her property and position and money, he's in big trouble. I mean, she can make things rough for him, not just with she and Henry, but a lot of folk.
Well, and we go
Rhonda?
from, his explanation of this tall, regal woman to her husband,
Yeah.
who, when he finally comes downstairs, he describes, that whole situation. Henry is just as jovial. He's a good chap, as could be. He has a glass of sherry ready for him, concerned naturally about his wife, whom he adores, yet he's still hospitable as always. He was in a stature quite a small man, shy and rather ineffectual. This woman, she's the one that runs things.
Sure, it says that he had inherited his fortune from his father and that he'd spent most of the fortune making other people happy, including Henry. And so, he's ready to tell Henry all, as Erin points out, and suddenly he can't do it. And Erin, do you want to read that for us on the second column of page 150? Nasty thing, this influenza, doctor.
I took a quick breath. Yes, Henry. Quite a severe attack she has, too. I'm afraid so. You'll see her through, Doctor. A pause. Yes, Henry, I'll see her through.
Okay. Nancy, your thoughts on this?
I think it's very interesting as well that the doctor is persuaded as well by Henry not to tell, and not to feel obligated to, in that he tells the doctor, we'll be alone together, we're going on this second honeymoon. We're both very fond of George, and the husband is there, Henry is there, he's hearing this, and then he tells the doctor, yes, nasty business, this influenza. So he's telling the doctor, in effect, I already know, I may already even know who the father of the child was, and you don't need to worry about it.
Okay, thank you. So we see a lot of implications here, don't we, that Beatrice Glendenning does not want to be hurt. She does not want to hurt her husband by a scandal or anything else. And we see the doctor, he has his professional integrity. He doesn't want to be harmed. But he also now does not want his social standing harmed. And he could hurt Henry, and he could hurt his social standing by saying, it's not influenza and you know it. Instead, we're all just going to pretend there's just this big elephant in the middle of the room, and we're all going to pretend it's not there at all.
And Henry goes along with this.
Yeah, Henry's going to go along with this. And hey, and it's just easiest to believe that way. It's just easiest to believe. Nobody's going to get hurt. George doesn't get kicked out. And yes,
I was going to say, this story also offers an insight into kind of the history of abortion when he says later, it was a thoroughly unpleasant case demanding constant surgical attention.
Yeah.
So he's got to keep going back, and he's got to keep helping her. And that's one of the reasons abortion was illegalized in the United States in the first place, was because of how brutal back alley abortions could be and how harmful to women. So, and this kind of offers an insight into that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
yet again, his concern is, I had to go back day after day after day and continue to care for her.
Oh, how I suffered.
Oh, how I suffered, yeah. He was not ever really concerned about her condition, but the inconvenience to him now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is very interesting, too, that this author, A.J. Cronin, is a physician, and he is writing this story from the perspective of a physician, and he is very critical of the medical profession in this. This is not... He's not friendly to the profession of which he is a part.
Yes, you know, I was kind of back and forth on that. I wondered, is that what he was trying to say, or was he trying to put down women who have abortions? I mean, it was, as a physician, it was kind of hard for me back and forth. I think your former observation is the correct one, but I was back and forth with this a little.
You know, I get from this that his feeling of women in general wasn't all that wonderful. You know, he says, oh God, the duplicity, the perfidy of women, the calm, deep, premeditated and infernal cunning.
Now, are you referring to the doctor or to the author? To A.J. Cronin or to
She is talking about A.J. Cronin, I think.
Yeah.
She's wondering if it's A.J. Cronin who feels this way,
I think,
or if it's just his character, the doctor.
I think if we're finding things in the text that are leading us in language, then it's intentional, probably, in that he's doesn't feel the same as the doctor does.
No.
But
He wants us to see this.
yeah.
I think that's why there's so much of this language, the duplicity, the damned woman, the girls in the workshop. I mean, the derogatory language that he uses is so evident that I think he's wanting us to see the abuse to women that is being perpetrated here.
And certainly the description that he gives to a woman who has a back alley abortion is like she's going right into hell right then, and you know, just to be slaughtered.
Well, and even when he's complicit, he removes himself from that. On page 150 in the second, just after that part we were reading where Henry and the doctor are talking, and about the middle of that paragraph, he says, I suppose I did my part in maintaining the deception, but the real miracles of strategy were performed by Beatrice and the nurse for Henry Glendenning, who lived all that time in the same house, who slept every night in the same bedroom, never caught on, basically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he says, I might have been complicit, but really she did all the work. And there's an odd kind of awe he holds for her as the most cunning, as the most, the best strategist, as the best. He keeps damning her for starters, but but nonetheless, and even towards the end, he stops referring to her as the individual. It's women in general, and then the creature in his final outburst.
The creature.
But it's this interesting way that he comes to see her as so separate, and his complicitness as separate.
Great comment, Aaron. I really like that a lot. And John, do you have a comment for us as well?
Yeah, I think it's important to point out the end of this story when the doctor says in the very last line.
Read that for us. Yes,
I will. But in September, I got my half-dozen brace of pheasants. They were nice, tender birds. He's basically saying in the end, none of this really mattered. It was all about me maintaining my social position, or at least now that it's over, I'm happy that I've maintained it.
Oh, this whole story, it was all about me. It didn't matter about this damnable creature.
He really is a despicable character.
Yeah, he is, Aaron.
Oh, I just think it's interesting that because it's kind of his train of thought, we are always in the doctor's head to some extent, that he has every opportunity to show some kind of compassion, and he just doesn't do it.
Nope, he doesn't. Well, let's go ahead then and turn the page, and we will look at this poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, The Mother. And I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting Gwendolyn Brooks in Washington, D.C., and I told her that I was using the piece in my book and that I enjoyed it very much. And she says, well, do you use it for positions of pro-choice or pro-life? And I said, oh, neither. This is completely a non-advocacy class, and it's to just make sure we get across points of view. And your piece does this so very well. And so she gave me a free book and signed it.
Wonderful,
And it was a great experience. But do you want to tell us a little bit about the background of this piece and why you like it, Nancy?
Gwendolyn Brooks grew up in the south side neighborhoods of Chicago. She was very concerned about social issues, about poverty, about low-income people, about economic issues, and how social and economic issues interrelated. And her poetry, this poem in particular, was probably the first poem that was ever published about the issue of abortion. And I think Gwendolyn Brooks really wanted very much to bring that issue as a topic for discussion. Not necessarily that she wanted to make a statement about the issue one way or the other, but she wanted us to be talking about this, to be seeing the complexities and the situations that women were suffering who were asking for abortions. This is something that was very critical and very difficult. And the poem was written in 1945, so this is an early poem in her career as well. And she was very concerned about women and the position that they were in, and about the necessity for them to have abortion. And we have to understand too that at the time that this was written, and the previous story too by A.J. Cronin, abortions were not legal, but access to birth control was very difficult as well. So we have this double bind on women. Neither were they able to have an abortion if they became pregnant, nor were they really able to protect themselves from pregnancy. So this is all very, very complex.
It is. It's very complex. And I wish you could have been with me to meet Gwendolyn Brooks, because I think you would have come away with the same insights, that she wasn't carrying a banner for any cause, but she wanted to open up this discussion that especially poor black women were facing.
Yes.
And did you have any more insights on this for us, Cassie?
Just a little bit about Gwendolyn Brooks, that she was the first black writer to win a Pulitzer Prize, that she started writing from a very young age and won several competitions, published very early. And she was just really, she's known for her poetic skill and her statements, her compassionate way of viewing human dilemmas in America.
Okay, thank you. And so really a wonderful poet. And do you mind reading this poem for us, Nancy? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but
I actually do, because I have heard Gwendolyn Brooks read, and the readings of her own work create such a different dynamic for the work itself. that I think we can't really know this poem until we've heard Gwendolyn Brooks read it. So
Oh, and
I
it's
would
sad
hesitate.
that she's passed away,
I know,
isn't it?
very much so. But
You know,
her,
we can just, you know, read it apart then.
but I will read it, but that's one of the reasons
Oh,
that I would
okay.
hesitate so much to do that, because her reading of it is so significant to the meaning of the poem.
It
So
is.
we'll realize in reading this that Gwendolyn Brooks would be adding a great deal to this work by her reading it herself.
Okay,
But I do
thank
think
you.
we need to read it to talk about it.
Okay.
Abortions will not let you forget. You remember the children you got that you did not get. The damp small pulps with little or no hair, the singers and workers that never handled the air. You will never neglect or beat them, or silence, or buy with a sweet. You will never wind up the sucking thumb, or shuttle off to ghosts that come. You will never leave them, controlling your luscious sigh, return for a snack of them, with gobbling mother eye. I have heard in the voices of the wind the voices of my dim killed children. I have contracted. I have eased my dim dears at the breasts they could never suck. I have said, sweets, if I sinned, if I seized your luck and your lives from your unfinished reach, if I stole your births and your names, your sweet, straight baby tears and your games, your stilted or lovely lives, your tumults, your marriage, aches and your deaths, if I poisoned the beginnings of your breaths, believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. Though why should I whine that the crime was other than mine, since anyhow you are dead. Or rather, or instead, you were never made. But that too, I am afraid, is faulty. Oh, what shall I say? How is the truth to be said? You were born, you had body, you died. It is just that you never giggled or planned or cried. Believe me, I loved you all. Believe me, I knew you, though faintly, and I loved you all.
You did a wonderful justice to the poem. Thank you. Thank you. Why is it such a powerful poem then, Erin? What is it that really strikes you at your core?
I think what's so interesting about the way she writes this is she's so eloquent, first of all, and I love the phrase like return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye, that idea that you just can't get enough, and these other things. But it's the way that she goes about describing what we consider living in relation to abortion, and the interesting, not really a dichotomy, but the interesting contrast she's putting there.
Thank you. Cassie?
She problematizes the issue so much by, I mean, she's not saying that it's wrong or right. Like you said, it's not pro-choice or pro-life. She shows how ugly it is with the imagery that she uses, the damp small pulps with little or no hair. But she's saying, you know, she's saying that it's ugly, but she's saying that she can't forget, and she will never have that, and they will never have that, and it's not fair to them, it's not fair to her. She's not sure whether they were alive, considered alive or not. She's just, you can feel all the anxiety that someone making this decision would feel. Yes. It's very problematic.
Thank you. And that she's very reflective about it once it's happened, and that others are still very reflective about these decisions once they've happened, that it's not so much a monstrous, emotionless decision, but something that does affect one, and one thinks through these things. John, and then Rhonda.
I was going to say, kind of along with what you were saying, I mean, she's saying in the end, I love them all. Mm-hmm. There was compassion in the decision. This was not an arbitrary decision that was made, and it was not emotionless, and it wasn't monstrous. So
I have a question.
Okay.
I don't know, there's this one line that I think is interesting, and I'm not even sure what to make of it, but I was wondering what you thought of it. She says, even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. Like there's some lack of choice or something.
Hey, that was just one of my next questions
okay.
too. What do you think about that line, Rhonda? That believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate.
Well, I see a number of different things. You know, I see that, you know, with that particular line, you know, again, to me, it wasn't filled with hatred. You know, I see regret, you know, regret for being in the spot, you know, that she was in. She says, you know, whine that the crime was other than mine. You know, that there was, it wasn't just her, you know, it wasn't, yeah, she was perhaps the carrier, but it could have been any number of reasons as to why the conception was there.
Okay, thank you. And certainly we know in 45 then birth control is not available, as you said before, or at least not for women necessarily. There might have been condoms for men, but as far as birth control for women, this was not easy to get, and it wasn't reliable. Any other thoughts, Nancy, about what the students have said, or even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate?
I just think it's this contradiction, the paradoxical position that she's in of loving the child that she gets and does not get, that she begets and does not get to raise. This is a poem of grief. Yeah. She is in mourning for the situation.
And not just for herself, I don't think, and also she seems to be mourning for them too, like very apologetic and knowing that they will never, you know, they could have been singers or workers, but they'll never get that.
Well, and she speaks for, you know, so many different girls and women. You know, we haven't spoken in any of our situations, you know, about the possibility of, you know, child abuse, you know, and the becoming, you know, this could have been a father or an uncle or someone who had caused a rape.
Could have been a rape victim,
you know,
yes.
The incest. It could have been someone on the street, or it could have been just, I can't afford it.
That's that's what I was wondering, is when she says whine that a crime was other than mine. So what, you know, was the crime that she was raped? Was it the injustice that there wasn't birth control available? Was it just her economic and social standing that made it difficult for her to make, you know, that caused her to make that choice?
There's such incredible sadness in this.
Yes.
There is. It is truly a poem of grief. Erin?
Well, I was thinking about these lines that we are coming back to, that she says, though why should I whine? Whine that the crime was other than mine. And I hear in that not just the fact that she's thinking about whining that it was something else. And I don't even like it. I think it's interesting that she uses that internal monologue, that she uses the term whine, because often we are so hard on ourselves. But that she doesn't shirk from the concept of choice. That this woman made a choice, a difficult choice, a choice she's not, I get a feeling that she's not sure if she regrets it or not. She can't even throw her arms around it entirely. And that in the why should I whine, that it was other than mine, she's in some ways taking responsibility for that choice.
She does.
Very much so.
And in some ways we see it as a Stoic poem as well, where she says, this has happened, I can't change it, but I'm going to tell you about it.
Yes.
Go on, Nancy.
And I don't get the feeling, I mean, she regrets it, but I wonder if she would make the same decision again.
I think she's almost saying she doesn't have a choice but to make those decisions.
Yes.
In her standing and situation.
Do you want to have one last thought on this, any students or Nancy? And then we'll move on to our next story.
I think, I don't know, so much of the debate between abortion seems to be, well, is it, you know, when is it a human? When is it, you know, when is it an actual human? When is it a fetus? When do you decide that? And she's just saying, you know, regardless, I don't know if it was living or if it was dead, you know. She says, since anyway, how you are dead, or rather, or instead, you were never made, but that too is faulty. She's not sure. And I think she's saying it doesn't really matter whether they're living or dead, or when you draw that line, it's a loss, and it's a loss for both sides, and it's just...
And this is a traumatic, devilish decision to have to make.
Yes.
Yeah.
And truly something that only literature can help us talk about, because we can see these issues still haven't been solved. It's been since 1945, and these issues are still present.
I find, one of the saddest things is that women, who have had abortions or feel that they're in that position, don't get to talk to anybody about it. They're stuck in their own feelings, and I think that's one of the things that this poem shows. It's not an acceptable thing still, even when it's an acceptable thing, in given situations. And who is there to talk to about it?
And from the different counselors who I've talked to who do abortion counseling, they say usually it is, how could the guy just walk away? He doesn't go through this same anguish that the mother does. So the father of the child, he's not examining this, but the woman certainly in these counseling sessions is grieving and examining it thoroughly.
In one interview that I read with Gwendolyn Brooks in discussing this poem, she said that so many people who read this poem feel that they know what she feels about abortion, or what her opinion is about abortion. And her comment was, go back and read the title. And I thought that was very interesting, that she said, this poem is definitely about abortion and about the complexities of abortion, but that what so many people miss is that it's also a description of a mother. So you've got the grieving person, the mother, the person who suffered abortion, who has chosen abortion, the grieving mother. This is all wrapped up in this one poem. So she's talking about a woman who has lost, who has suffered this loss, who has had to make this decision, and who is a mother at the same time. So you've got all of these contradictory notions here.
There's one thing I don't think that we've all talked about, at all, is that it includes women who have spontaneous abortions as well.
Yes.
Sure. Miscarriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Any other thoughts then? Well, we'll move on to a very classic piece by Ernest Hemingway called Hills Like White Elephants. And believe it or not, this was the most expensive piece to put in the book.
Was it?
And it's pretty short. But it really does get across the message. It's rather opaque, too. And some students reading it say, are you sure they're talking about abortion in here? They're just saying, it's just a little air. And then once they reread it, they can see where all the implications are. But certainly it's about a whole lot more than abortion. It's a lot about a relationship.
Yes.
So Cassie, do you want to tell us a little bit about Ernest Hemingway?
Sure. Ernest Hemingway actually also grew up in Chicago, in more of a suburb, not the city. And his father was a well-to-do physician. He initiated his son in the rituals of hunting and fishing and a way of life, and also death. They both committed suicide in the same way. But Hemingway, along with other authors, Gertrude Stein, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, and James Joyce, created a revolutionary style of literature, a new style of literary style and language, And it was very compact, with deceptively simple sentence structures and restricted vocabulary, precise imagery, and that's kind of Hemingway's signature style that you read. He suggested a lot that relationships ended in death and destruction in a lot of his pieces, and he's been critiqued for that, but written many classic novels, and he's a very well-known poet, very good writer.
Okay, well, thank you very much. What did you think about this story, Nancy?
It's a very, very interesting piece. The style that Hemingway uses in this, in which he tells us very little as possible. I mean, he gives us only the very basic pieces of information, and we have to fill in the rest. But let's just read the first paragraph.
Okay, thank you.
Of this piece.
All right, and Cassie, do you want to read that for us, please?
Sure. The hills across the valley of the Ebro were long and white. On this side there was no shade and no trees, and the station was between two lines of rails in the sun. Close against the side of the station there was a warm shadow of the building and a curtain made of strings of bamboo beads hung across the open door into the bar to keep out flies. The American and the girl with him sat at a table in the shade outside the building. It was very hot, and the express from Barcelona would come in 40 minutes. It stopped at this junction for 2 minutes and went on to Madrid.
Okay, thank you. So Nancy, what about this opening?
This is the setting both for the physical application of the story, the physical setting of the story. It's also the emotional setting that's taking place between the American and the girl. And the language itself tells us a lot about what's going on here. The hills across the valley were long and white. On one side, there was no shade and no trees. So this is a very stark setting. And this is actually a physical geographical setting of this is not only between Barcelona and Madrid, but this is a cross section of the railroad that goes like this. Mm-hmm. So they are at a setting in the center of the cross section of the railroad. So they're not just in the middle of two cities, but they're in the whole center section. And this places them in a very interesting psychological, interpersonal, and physical place, geographical place. So that's where we start this story. And anybody else want to pick up some of the other language that we're given here? This sparse language that's very important to the setting of the story?
Maybe not yet.
Okay. Anyone want to comment on the barrenness of it? Okay, so anyway.
Very hot, there are no trees,
barren.
There's no shade. There's no way to get out of this.
Yeah.
I mean, we are really
Barren situation.
in the spotlight here,
Yeah.
in the middle of this intersection of the railroad tracks between these four major spots in Spain. So
it gives you the feeling that it's a barren situation and there's a way to choose, a choice to make in this
And it has to
intersection.
be made now.
Yes.
right. In 40 minutes,
In 40
the train will
minutes.
come and it will stop for 2 minutes only. The trains really do stop for only 2 minutes, but it's
Right.
and this is written in 1927, things haven't changed much.
No, they haven't.
But they're going to have 2 minutes to get on the train. So this tells us the urgency of this conversation. Even though the conversation is very casual and what they actually say to each other is not explicit, but we get this, he's setting us up for the intensity of the situation that we are about to hear in this conversation.
Okay, and we get to know our two characters, an American and a girl. So it could be 1927's language to call her a girl, but she's probably not American, or he might have said, two Americans, a man and a girl. So we've got an American and a girl, and as we read on, we know she's pregnant and they're not married, and that they love traveling around and getting a variety of alcoholic drinks.
Yes.
Well, and
Trying
it's
drinks.
funny because it doesn't actually, I don't think it actually explicitly says that she's pregnant, does it?
It doesn't.
But yeah, that's...
They have a relationship, and there's a big complication in
Right,
this
something-
relationship.
They travel together, we do know
Right,
that.
and it's hinted by little things like, it's funny, she asks him what they should drink, so she's already looking to him for answers and solutions, and he just says that it's pretty hot, and she said, let's drink beer. So let's drink something cheap, something that feels, I don't know, it's
Cold,
cold,
anyway.
it's cold, and it's, I don't know, more frivolous, maybe take your mind off things, and it's not really something, it's not the, I don't know, most favorable drink to have, I think.
Okay, John?
Were they also aware that alcohol could harm the child
No,
at the time?
at this time they wouldn't.
No.
That
They
wouldn't have
wouldn't
been
have
a
done
thought, no.
Okay.
No, but his usage of words again between man and girl and what he uses is that I get the impression that she is really quite young and he is more wise and worldly.
Knows a lot more about alcoholic
Yeah.
beverages.
It certainly sets up the power dynamic
Yeah.
between the two people as well.
Yeah, well, we're down to just 3 minutes. So Nancy, I'm going to turn it back to you and have you help us develop what points you think we should about their relationship. As she says, don't those hills look like white elephants? And this isn't what he wants to talk about.
No. And he is talking about, he brings up the issue of the very simple operation
Let the air in.
to just let the air in. This is just, it's really nothing, he says to her. And says that this isn't anything. Does this mean anything to you? Implies that it doesn't mean, the pregnancy doesn't mean anything to him. Doesn't make any difference one way or the other, but he would much prefer that they don't go ahead with the pregnancy.
And he says, I'll stay with you all the time, Jig. They'll just let the air in. It's perfectly natural.
Right.
But what will we do afterward?
She says.
Yeah, what
She's
will we do
concerned
afterward?
about
Yeah.
long-term
Right.
repercussions of this, and of the long-term, and of the nature of the relationship. She's looking beyond the abortion. She's looking beyond this cafe meeting into down the road, and wondering whether or not she has the abortion. Is this relationship going to remain intact? And this is what she's concerned about. She's concerned about the relationship and about evaluating whether or not this relationship is going to be maintained.
He's very manipulative.
He is very manipulative and keeps saying to her, you don't have to, Jig. You really don't have to, but it's very simple. It's perfectly simple.
Yeah, he's putting the pressure
And-
on
And
her.
he's really putting the pressure on her.
Yeah, and you really don't have to do it. And she says, but I'll do it because I don't care about me. What do you
Right.
mean? This is on page 158, first column. I don't care about me. Well, I care about you. Oh, yes, but I don't care about me, and I'll do it, and then everything will be fine. I don't want you to do it if you don't feel that way. So she's saying, I don't have much self-esteem on this. And I don't have much time left, Nancy. You've got
Right.
about 30 seconds to wrap this
Okay.
up for us.
On page 158, the girl stood up and walked to the end of the station. Across on the other side were the fields of grain and trees along the banks. Far away, beyond the river, were the mountains. The shadow of a cloud moved across the field. She's looking forward to the end of the relationship and the end of the pregnancy, and is very disturbed about this, and feels that she is being very much pressured to do something that she is not really in control of
Right.
herself.
So she's moving with the white elephants. Instead of fertility and having a baby and a relationship, she's moving to nothing.
To nothing.
Okay. Thank you, and I wish we would have had more time.
too.
Thank you for being with us, and thanks to you students. Bye-bye.